Let's not meet. The hotel basement. This happened in the summer of 2010, when I was just entering my teenage years. My family took a trip to a really nice hotel in the city. I can't really remember why we decided to take the trip, but I remember a lot of family friends coming with and staying in adjacent rooms. I've never asked my parents, and it's not really important to the story. To preface, I am a bit of scaredy cat and always have been. I'm a pretty skinny, fragile kid, so I get spooked pretty easily, even now. This, however, was almost definitely not me freaking myself out like I normally did. Looking back, I'm incredibly lucky I trusted my instincts. This hotel had a strange design to it. The lobby was actually on the 4th floor, not the bottom floor, which I found strange. To access the lobby, you had to use the elevator. There was no way for you to get to it from the stairs. This information would have been nice before everything happened. As you'll find out, the hotel was organized in a square shape. Every floor was lined with a balcony, and you could look down into the lobby and cafe area from your floor. Essentially, if you were walking to your room, you could be seen from anyone that was on your floor if they just stepped out of their room and looked around. I always was afraid I'd fall over the balcony and sail down 8 stories to my death, but they were high enough to a point where I wasn't too concerned for my safety. The first day or two was nice. My friends and I hung out and played cards all day, or we watched whatever was on TV. At night, we'd explore the halls of the hotel and tell each other ghost stories. It was a really fun time, even though I didn't fully understand why we were there. On the 3rd day, though, things got strange fast. I woke up to the sound of screaming coming from outside my door. Now, because of the hotel's design I mentioned, sounds from the lobby would echo all the way up to the top of the building. So, when I walked outside to investigate, I immediately looked over the balcony to see what the commotion was about. I saw a girl laying on the ground, eggs and milk splattered everywhere around her. People were rushing to help her, and I heard a couple people telling each other to call 911. It seemed like the girl was unconscious. Maybe she had passed out or something. I scanned the lobby and saw that my family and a couple of my friends were in the lobby getting breakfast, all staring at the event in front of them. I decided I'd rush down to meet them to find out what had happened. The elevator was on the opposite side of my floor, so I took the stairwell located right next to my room. We were on the 7th or 8th floor, so I knew I only had to take about 4 flights down. Not a big deal. I descended for a little while, looking for the number 4 on the wall or the letter L. I passed floor 5, ready to find a door to the lobby. I took about 2 more flights of steps before realizing that there hadn't been a door for the 4th floor, nor had there been a door for the 3rd or 2nd. Now, at this point I probably should have turned back, but I continued down because I was tired and didn't want to climb back up. There were some weird side hallways that went into pitch black areas with a bunch of piping and wiring, and though I was curious to explore, I passed them by. I quickly hit the bottom floor, a dimly lit and cold room with cinder block walls and concrete floors. In front of me was a set of double doors. I hesitated at first, but I assumed that this was just another way back to the lobby, so I opened them and entered. Behind the doors was a massive warehouse type room, probably the size of a smaller basketball stadium. The only light coming in was from the stairwell behind me, so I really wasn't able to see much. Stairs were stacked and covered in plastic wrap, tables lined the wall, and in the distance I thought I could see boxes stacked and lined against the wall as well. I was probably the storage room for the hotel. I looked around and saw an elevator in the back of the room, so I made my way towards it. I closed the door to the stairwell and began to walk in the dim light. The room was super muggy and dusty, and it seemed like nobody had been down there in a long time. As I got closer to the elevator, I noticed it was a little bigger than the elevators in the lobby and other floors. I pressed the up button, but got no response. There was a card swiper next to the button. Must have been for employees only, I thought. I turned back towards the stairwell doors, making my way past the chairs and tables along the wall. When I got to the door, I gave it a tug. Locked, of course. This is when things started to hit me, and I realized I was stuck in the dark. dusty basement of a hotel. I didn't have a phone because my parents wouldn't let me get one until I graduated middle school, so I couldn't call anyone. Everyone likely assumed I was still asleep in the room, so I began to freak out, believing that nobody was going to look for me. I searched around the warehouse, looking for other ways out. Some areas of the place were better lit than others, so I looked around in areas I could see first before starting on the darker side of the room. There was one other set of doors that I found, but it happened to be locked as well. I began to cry, scared that nobody would ever find me in this basement. I swear it felt like hours, but I think only a handful minutes passed before I heard the door creak open. It wasn't the door from the stairwell, rather, the second door I had found. A slim, middle-aged man in a lab coat came out of the doors. Now, if this was 21-year-old me seeing this man, I would be very confused as to why this guy was wearing a lab coat in a hotel. I was only 12 or 13 at the time, so I immediately was relieved at the sight of an adult who looked smart. I approached him, tears in my eyes, and he immediately looked surprised to see me. As you'd expect. "What are you doing down here?" he yelled. "I got lost on my way down to the lobby and I've been locked in here. Do you have a key?" I was shaking, eager to get out of there. He didn't answer my key question, and instead he said, "I know a way out of here. Follow me." He began to walk towards the doors with the stairwell, and I followed, relieved that someone had finally come to save me. We approached the doors, and I began to reach for the handle, but he continued walking. "Isn't it right here?" I asked him. I will never forget the look on his face when I said that. He looked nervous, and though it was dim, I could see sweat glistening from his forehead and behind his glasses. "No, this way," he said sternly. I continued to follow him, but I was now nervous myself. We had passed the door to the stairs and were now headed toward a darker side of the basement, away from the elevators. He looked like he had no clue where he was leading me, as he kept checking around him, almost as if he was taking in his surroundings for the first time. We turned a corner and began walking towards the boxes, a dead end. I immediately froze, realizing that something was very, very wrong. This guy had no idea where he was going, nor did he appear to work at the hotel. I said, my voice shaking, "Okay, where are we going?" He turned and said, "This way, just follow me." I knew that there were no doors by those boxes. I had checked there first after I found out the stairwell door was locked. I want to thank whatever God is up there for gifting me with the idea I had next. I started yelling, as loud as I could. I yelled so loud I gave myself a headache. The man, irritated and plugging his ears, began yelling back at me, "What are you doing? Be quiet." I continued to yell. I don't even remember how long I was yelling. Finally, the man snapped and began quickly walking towards me. I went in a full sprint towards the stairwell doors, hoping to God they'd somehow be magically open. He didn't run after me. He walked sternly behind me, muttering things like "stupid ducker" and other kind of compliments. I was about 5 feet from the door when somebody burst through. My savior, a hotel janitor who had heard the screaming from the stairwell. He saw the situation, me and some random guy in a lab coat in a locked basement, and immediately told me to get behind him. The janitor asked me who the man was. I said I had no idea, that he had come in through the door on the other side of the room, and I pointed to the door. The janitor quickly radioed into the desk that he had found a child in the basement, and quietly, so that I wouldn't hear, he said this man came from outside, get security or something like that. The man in the lab coat started trying to argue with the janitor, claiming that he simply was looking for a bathroom. The janitor clearly wasn't buying it, and kept saying things like, "Wait till security gets here and talk to them about it." I was standing beside him the whole time, trying to take in what was happening, confused out of my mind. Eventually, an employee from the front desk arrived and took me back up the steps to the lobby, where I met with my family, who surprisingly had no idea I was missing. I told them the story, crying and shaking, and they hugged me tightly, thanking the employee over and over for their help. I never got to thank that janitor, though. Looking back now, I have absolutely no clue what that man was doing in the basement. I don't have any information as to what happened afterwards, or who he was. I know for a fact that the incident with the girl in the lobby was unrelated. Something about low blood sugar. Not sure. I've thought about that day a lot, and the only explanation I can put together is that the door I had found in the basement led to the streets of the city, where he must have wandered in from. I have no clue what his intentions were, why he was wearing a lab coat, or why he chose to pretend to know a way out. To be frank, this could have just been a huge misunderstanding of some sort, and I just chose a really bad time to get lost. But all I know for sure is if I hadn't screamed my lungs out, I might not have been telling this story the same way, or at all. So, strange man in a lab coat wandering around a dark, dusty hotel basement. Let's not meet. Creepy cousin. Hey everyone, long time lurker, first time poster to this sub. Please feel free to leave me your opinions of this event. So back in junior high I was on the volleyball team. I live in a very rural community. Every year the school would do a little fundraiser for all the sports teams at this tiny park. It had a couple makeshift booths, kitchen area, and stage. Each team would come up with a game and the players would take turns running that booth. In those days I was attached at the hip to one friend in particular who I'm still close with. I shall name her Chris. Both of us played sports and attended this event together. Her mom dropped us off at the park and was to pick us up after the event was over so we could help with cleanup. Both our working shifts were early so we had a lot of downtime. We danced the night away and right before the event was over we decided to play football with some of our friends. This park is basically a bunch of fields and trees separating the different field segments. There is a parking lot when you first enter the park where everyone was parking that night. Directly in front of the parking lot is the location for all the booths. This whole setup is on top of a big hill and at the bottom of this hill is where we played football because we had just enough lights from the booth area to see. On with the story. I was picked as a sitter for the first game. I get bored easily and noticed my dad's first cousin was walking around the parking lot. He is on the rescue squad and was basically patrolling it. Now this man isn't someone I have seen often in my life but enough that I know who he is and he knows me. Right before this event my parents went through a divorce. This man and his wife picked up some furniture with my mom for her new home. They were literally with us the entire day about 2 weeks before this event. The following conversation just gets creepier the older I get. I walked up to cousin and said, "Hey, how are you?" He responds with, "Hey girl," which is a very usual response for him, and wraps his arm around my shoulders. Again, very normal behavior for him, no red flags. We make small talk and he asks polite questions about my family that I politely answer. The whole time we are talking he asks normal adult questions and I bring up the furniture he moved into my house. This is where things got weird. This whole time he is walking me around these cars with his arm around my shoulders. It's a decent size lot and I realize we are heading to the far corner about 2 car lengths until we reach darkness and a grove of woods that circles down around this park. I stop but he keeps gently guiding me towards this grove of trees. It's weird and I'm starting to sense some red flags. His grip has also tightened up a bit but at the time I'm just confused about what's happening. I put my arm around his lower back and sort of spin us around so we get a few feet back towards the center of the lot. I've surprised him a little bit. When we regain our footing he just stops moving and stands there, arms still around me. At this point I keep saying my friends are waiting and I need to go. Yet he just keeps talking. I'm no longer letting him guide me around, and just when I'm about to kick him in the sunshine place I hear Chris. She yells very loudly and comes running into the lot. She also makes a big show of getting her basketball coach's attention, saying we will be right over to do something. Finally the death grip loosens and I walk away. My mind was reeling and I was so confused, but I wanted this guy to realize I was onto him. I turned once I was a safe distance and said that I would tell my dad. He said hello. This goofy clown of a man straight blank says, "Who is your father?" I'm completely flabbergasted but tell him my dad's name. Even though it was under bad lighting I swear the color drained from his face. He just said "oh" and walked away. To this day I have no idea who this man thought I was or why he was guiding me to the dark. We talked about both my parents and their divorce during our stroll around, so it beats me. I did tell my mom about the situation and she just said he is a goofball and to stay away from him. I know this isn't the creepiest Let's Not Meet, yet I just hope some younger person can learn something. I was too terrified of making a scene and really think looking back on it I was in danger. My friend Chris later told me she had watched part of what happened and got creeped out because she realized where he was leading me and that I was very clearly trying to walk away. That's why she ran over screaming and got adult attention. It's so weird because as a young person you're so afraid of causing a scene over nothing, but your safety is more important than that. If a situation ever makes you uncomfortable, do everything you can to get out. So creepy relative, let's not meet again ever. The smelly guy at the fence. So this story took place when I was about 15 years old and was still riding my bike to school. My father is pretty strict and often got really angry when I left my bike in the front yard. Though we live in a pretty wealthy area with some security guards driving around, there are some sketchy people walking around. So my father told me not to leave my bike laying around for people to see at night, so they wouldn't be invited to climb over the fence and steal it. I was home alone with my 2 big dogs. If I hadn't had these 2, I wouldn't have stayed home alone or still wouldn't do it. I don't remember what I was doing, but it was round about 1 AM and I remembered that my bike was still laying in the front yard. So I thought I'd quickly put it in the cabin. We have a pretty big yard which is not very well lit, so I was already not really comfortable going out at that hour by myself. I took my younger dog with me, he was about 4 at the time, and left my older dog inside because she just was diagnosed with cancer and I didn't want to put her through more stress by running with me while I was riding my bike. I couldn't use the front door because I didn't know where my keys were and couldn't leave the door wide open for people to see. So I went through the back door, walked around the house, and my dog was just minding his own business, running in the opposite direction to where I was going and not paying attention at all to what I was saying because he was still young and rebellious at the time. I got on my bike and it's like a 1-minute ride down a little hill our house is built onto the cabin. It was pretty dark but I know the path really well. I put my bike into the cabin, closed the door and speeded back up the little hill, walking directly towards the gate. It was a little bit humid and windy, so when I was about halfway up the hill there was a nasty smell, so I looked up and saw a man standing there behind the gate. My dog was nowhere to be seen, but he had to be on the other side of the yard. So as the idiot that I was and not really realizing what was going on, I kept walking towards the man. Right when I had to turn right to get back to the house, I stopped and just stared at him. He now was holding onto the gate and was trying to open it while sometimes whispering and then all of a sudden yelling at me. I honestly don't know what he was saying because I was in shock. Silly me, I was pretty close to the gate, paralyzed and not able to move, so he reached through the gate and grabbed my arm. I remember smelling alcohol and sweat like this dude hadn't showered in weeks. Right in that moment my dog came running towards me while barking. He tried to bite the man but he let go my arm as soon as my dog started barking. So I started running. I got to the back door, went inside and yelled my dog's name because I couldn't hear him anymore. But nothing. So I stood there about 30 seconds in absolute panic because I love my dogs more than anything else. My older dog was freaking out as well, but then my younger dog came running around the corner and I closed the door behind us. I sat on the couch completely exhausted. My dog's not leaving my side and I called my father. He told me to just stay where I was because they were only 2-3 minutes away. But when they pulled up to our house there was no one to be seen. My mother came in to sit on the couch with me, but my father went around the area and house to check if he could find the man, but he didn't. So when he called the security company and told them to watch out for this man, but nothing ever came from that. I never saw him again and never left my bike laying in the front yard at night. So to the awful smelling man, please let's not meet again. My bus stalker. Hopefully this is a good fit for the sub. I wound up here and immediately remembered this story. So I was living with my grandparents at the time and they lived in a far out residential area of town at the end of a road that then leads into farming areas. They were in a townhouse complex and fortunately right at the front, which meant it was a 1-minute walk out of the complex to the bus stop right across the street. My stop was the very last stop on the route. One day I was waiting at the bus stop that's right near the trendy downtown area of my city, but a little out of the way. It's a relatively small city and doesn't have the greatest bus system. There were only 2 buses that stopped at this particular stop. The one to my place and the one into the next town over. This was its last stop before hitting the freeway. The stop is also right next to the restaurant where my then fiance, now husband, worked as a manager. I was sitting there texting my fiance as he was just starting to close up. It was around 4 PM. But it was a lunch joint, and a kinda sketchy, dirty looking guy comes up and sits down on the bench. There was plenty of room so it was no big deal. After a moment he starts to make conversation. This was around 2 years ago so I don't remember exactly what he was saying, but I asked if he was taking the bus into nearby city and he says yes. He lived there. The whole time he was there he was almost comically manspreading, with one leg up on the bench, proudly displaying his crotch. I ignored this and politely responded to him when necessary while texting my fiance. My bus arrives. Creepy guy gets on. This is not the bus to nearby town. I'm a little weirded out at this point and mention it to my fiance in my texts. I was sitting at the back of the bus and he was sitting at the very front but turned all the way around so he was facing me, staring at me. Oh hell no. The bus goes through some residential areas and then makes a brief stop at a little strip mall and then it's just houses from there until the end. I'm texting my fiance and getting more and more creeped out as he does nothing but look at me when I'm not watching. We hit the strip mall and he doesn't get off. Now I'm legit freaked out. There's nowhere else for him to go. I text my fiance and tell him this and he immediately calls me, says to act normal. He's coming to meet me at my bus stop. Don't get off anywhere else. Don't interact. My husband is now a security guard and going into policing so he's taking the situation pretty seriously. I somewhat loudly respond, okay yeah, I'll see you there babe. Creepy guy immediately turns around and faces front. Holy crap. I spend the next 5 minutes anxiously thinking of what I'll do if he isn't there when I get to my stop. I can't just go into my house if he gets off the bus. He'll know where I live. We come around the corner to the very last stop and this guy still hasn't gotten off. He's very intentionally facing as far away from me as possible now. I get off the bus just as my fiance pulls up, and this guy does not. This is the last stop, and the bus is now going on the reverse route. This guy was following me. My fiance ended up walking me to my door, checking the house and making me lock everything up until my grandparent got home. I was pretty shaken to be honest. He went back to work to finish closing up but came back again later. All in all I'm lucky to have a husband who took me so seriously. And I'm not sure what would have happened had I not gotten that call from him that he was coming. Too long didn't read. A rando guy says he's going into nearby town where he lives by bus. Instead follows me onto my bus into a suburban area with nothing but houses. All the way to my place, which is the very last possible stop. My fiance meets me there and saves the day. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.